Mabel, where are you going for your birthday today? We don't have classes this afternoon. I'll bring your gift in a bit. Phoebe Sheffield said, linking her arm with mine as we walked through the school grounds. The sunlight was a bit harsh, and I raised my hand to shield my eyes, looking somewhat bewildered at my friend beside me. Seeing my expression, she misinterpreted my meaning and threw up her hands in mock complaint. I get it, Arthur's definitely coming to pick you up today. Fine, fine, I won't interrupt your little love nest. As she finished speaking, the roar of an engine could be heard in the distance. An AMG coupe, its body covered in roses, came speeding towards us, turning heads as it approached. This bold and passionate display of affection was typical of Arthur Brunswick's style. He got out of the car just as I remembered, handing me the car keys and stepping aside so I could see the vehicle behind him. Mabel, happy birthday. Do you like it? A gentle breeze ruffled the hair on his forehead as he gazed at me with a tender, loving smile. The smile was too dazzling, it hurt my eyes. I pressed my lips together, trying to hold back the sting in the corners of my eyes. Arthur, being the narcissist he was, probably thought I was moved to tears by his gesture. Sure enough, Arthur held me gently, comforting me. Mabel, why are you crying? How is it that you're still such a crybaby even now that you're all grown up? Phoebe tactfully retreated to the side, excitedly taking out her phone to record a video and post it with the caption "Epic Romance." Arthur helped me into the driver's seat before getting in on the other side. There was a small bag under the passenger seat containing a diamond necklace I had wanted to order in LA 6 months ago. But because it needed to be shipped and I didn't have time, I had forgotten about it. I hadn't expected Arthur to be so attentive to such details. He was so good to me, paying attention to every little thing, treating me like a precious treasure. But when I thought about everything that would happen in the future, those painful, struggling memories rolled through my mind like a tidal wave, leaving me breathless. I felt a twinge in my teeth, but I still managed to speak with difficulty. Arthur, let's break up. The smile, along with the loving look, froze on Arthur's face. Arthur and I have been classmates since nursery school. Back then, I was the prettiest little girl in the class, and he was the new transfer student. On his first day, he came up to me and planted a kiss on my cheek. I burst into tears, frightened, and the new teacher who witnessed it cried even louder than I did. Most of the children who attended this nursery came from upper-class families, and each child was treated like royalty. When Arthur's parents learned of the incident, they brought him to my house to apologize. To their surprise, they discovered that Arthur's mother and mine were university classmates. As old friends reunited, our two families gradually became close, and Arthur and I formed a bond because of this. In my eyes, he was just an immature little boy, yet he went around declaring that he would protect me and not let anyone bully me. I thought he was childish, but as time passed, I unknowingly fell for him. The mischievous boy gradually grew up. He didn't become much more mature, but he became my Arthur. Both families assumed we would marry after we each completed our studies. Mr. Brunswick thought Arthur's personality was a bit too rebellious. So he sent him abroad for a year to polish his skills. It was just a year apart, and we were both confident in our relationship. Mr. Brunswick wanted to test him, so during his time in England, apart from tuition, he was given limited living expenses. For a young man used to luxury, it was probably quite challenging. Unexpectedly, after he left, he never once asked his family for help. This trip abroad transformed him completely, and there was no trace left of his former spoiled self. And along with this change came a shift in his feelings for me. Arthur said he met another girl when he was at his lowest point. At the time, she was working part-time at a restaurant to support her studies. They grew close, and their hardship sparked love. Then, what about me? The boy who once only had eyes for me returned home holding another girl's hand, announcing the end of our relationship of over a decade. I found it laughable and absurd. The girl's name was Clara Ashworth. She looked very sweet, with a soft, gentle voice like a little rabbit that could be startled by the slightest noise. Arthur was afraid I would frighten her and was extremely protective of her. Clara was studying abroad on a scholarship. She was excellent, but her excellence was not enough to bridge the gap between her and the Brunswick family. The Brunswick family would never agree to her marrying Arthur. And Arthur blamed all the obstacles and difficulties between him and Clara on me. The Arthur who returned from England seemed completely transformed. He insisted on being with Clara even if it meant falling out with his family. After leaving the Brunswick family, Arthur quickly made a name for himself in the industry with his ruthless tactics, becoming a rising star. His methods were harsh, and he made quite a few enemies. That year, I was kidnapped by one of his rivals. The first thing I did was to call him, but he didn't answer. My mum cried on the other end of the phone as she handed over the exorbitant ransom as agreed. But the kidnappers who received the money didn't let me return home safely. I was killed, a knife to my abdomen, and my past turned to ashes. I made the wrong choice in my previous life, so this time I don't want to repeat the same mistake. I turned to look at Arthur Brunswick, whose eyes were already starting to redden. Trying my best to appear cold and determined, I repeated, "Let's break up." "Why?" At this moment, Arthur looked slightly younger than I remembered, his face full of shock and disbelief. I pressed my lips together, unsure how to phrase it, my fingertips trembling involuntarily. I handed him back the car keys, preparing to get out, but he quickly locked the doors and grabbed my wrist. Arthur's pupils reflected my cold face. He hugged my waist, holding tighter and tighter, burying his head in my neck, cautiously probing. "Are you joking, Mabel?" "Mabel, it's not April Fool's Day. Please don't say such things so casually to hurt me, okay?" "Arthur, how did you manage to hurt me then?" I calmly but firmly pushed him away, opened the car door under his gaze, and left with the confused Phoebe in tow. This time as I left, I didn't look back, just as he had done to me. "Mabel, what's going on?" I haven't finished recording my video yet. Phoebe was my best friend and also considered herself a wild shipper of Arthur and me. I took a deep breath, forcing back my tears. "Didn't you say you had a gift prepared for me?" "Let's go see it." Phoebe gulped, her voice suddenly rising 8 octaves. "What? You've broken up with Arthur Brunswick?" She was my secondary school classmate. Since we attended a private school from a young age, many relationships between people were inseparable from family connections. Phoebe's father was a nouveau riche, and in our class, very few people looked up to her. Some even isolated her. This group isolation behavior seemed childish to me. I just treated her normally, but I didn't expect this would make us gradually become close friends. Phoebe was very much like her father, who extremely liked to wear gold and silver. She was a person who pursued luxury goods. Although she didn't cover herself in large logos, she still exuded an air of wealth. Walking on the bustling streets, she was quite eye-catching. I covered her mouth, feeling a bit helpless. "Keep your voice down." "Why? Is it because he's about to go to England?" "But he's only going for a year, and you can visit him anytime." "It's just a year, you two have known each other for over a decade, surely you're not worried about a long-distance relationship?" I felt bitter inside and bit my tongue. I used to be this confident too. "Phoebe, I just don't want to be with him anymore." It would be a lie to say I didn't like Arthur, but thinking about everything in my past life, I didn't have the courage to continue with him either. I couldn't understand how someone who liked me so much could suddenly stop liking me. Phoebe looked at my reddening eyes, probably seeing me this upset for the first time. She nodded blankly. She had always been a bit oblivious, but she was also a very sensitive girl. She hugged me tightly and whispered comfortingly in my ear. "The more friends you have, the more paths you have. The more men you date, the more options you have." That evening, Phoebe practically dragged me to a club and secured a VIP table. The pounding bass in the club threatened to burst my eardrums. I felt a bit dizzy and leaned back. "What would you like to drink?" Phoebe asked enthusiastically. "Tequila," I replied, covering my aching ears. "If you can't beat them, join them. Here you go." A hand with distinct knuckles appeared before me, holding a lime and a shot glass. In the dim light, his profile looked even more chiseled and mysterious. I glanced questioningly at Phoebe. She winked and mouthed, "Out with the old, in with the new." Phoebe texted me with a mischievous smile. "He's Crispin Fleetwood, my dad's friend's son. What do you think? Not bad, right? Give him a chance if you like him." I looked at Phoebe in surprise, then glanced at the man in front of me. Crispin Fleetwood? I'd heard about him in financial reports and from my parents. He was a rising star in the business world. I was taken aback. Phoebe usually chose her boyfriends with her eyes closed. But she'd managed to introduce me to one of the most eligible bachelors in the industry. However, I wasn't ready to move on so quickly. That wasn't why I'd decided to split from Arthur. I waved my hand, politely declining the drink he offered. Seeing the awkward atmosphere, Phoebe quickly called over a waiter and whispered something. The waiter looked at her in surprise, then his eyes lit up with excitement. Suddenly, I had a bad feeling. 2 rows of male and female models surrounded our table, holding illuminated ace of spades. Phoebe stood in the middle of the booth, excitedly popping champagne and shouting into a microphone. "Happy birthday to my best friend, Mabel Poole." In an instant, I felt all eyes in the club on me. I pressed my frantically throbbing temples. What should I have expected from Phoebe's taste? I tried to escape to the loo several times, but all attempts ended in failure. Arthur sent me countless messages and made numerous calls in the evening, which irritated me. I turned off my phone completely. Phoebe dragged me to play games, and after a few drinks, I started feeling dizzy. The chaotic thoughts that had been swirling in my mind all day slowly began to unravel. I reached for a glass of tequila, licked the salt on the rim, and winced as I downed it in one gulp. Drinking hastily, the spiciness hit my throat, causing me to cough lightly. Crispin had somehow seated himself beside me. Crispin Fleetwood, he introduced himself, half his face hidden in shadow, his expression unclear. He called over a waiter to borrow a lighter. The flame danced in his pitch-black pupils, but the darkness in his eyes seemed bottomless. Crispin sprinkled a thin layer of sugar on a lime wedge and precisely caramelized it to a golden brown. "This makes it easier to drink." His sobriety was at odds with the dim, intoxicating atmosphere of the pub. "Is that so?" Feeling tipsy, I took the shot glass from his hand and drank it in one go. Then I bit down on the lime wedge on the back of my hand. It was quite a unique flavor. I grabbed another glass and offered one to him as well. To my surprise, he waved it away, showing me the sparkling water in his hand. I smirked slightly, not drinking? He smiled, staying healthy. I glanced at him, amused. Coming to a pub to stay healthy at the prime of his life, how humorous. "Miss Poole, is something troubling you? You seem unhappy tonight." Crispin's gaze fell on me. His long fingers rested on the edge of his glass, tapping it gently. "Troubling me?" A glance from the corner of my eye sobered me up instantly. Standing in the crowded aisle was someone who shouldn't be here. Arthur Brunswick. He strode into the booth, putting distance between Crispin and me. Arthur held me tightly in his arms. Unlike the smoky pub air, he smelled of familiar and pleasant bergamot. Before I could struggle, his tears had already fallen on my shoulder, slightly hot. Arthur was crying? Phoebe was also startled by Arthur's sudden appearance. Arthur often told on her to her parents for bringing me to these entertainment venues. So now Phoebe had a conditioned response upon seeing him. She pondered briefly, then through her drunken haze, remembered that we had broken up, and her eyes widened in shock. In Phoebe's mind, there was no way our breakup could be due to me doing something to hurt Arthur. So it must have been Arthur who wronged me. Anger flared in Phoebe's eyes. She raised her champagne glass and staggered over, aiming a kick at Arthur's backside. "Arthur, what kind of man are you?" Her kick not only hit Arthur but me as well. As we were about to fall, Arthur instinctively moved to protect my head. But another strong arm pulled me out, preventing me from tumbling ungracefully to the floor. "Thank you." "You're welcome," Crispin nodded slightly. Arthur, however, fell to the ground. He stood up unhurriedly, seeming to recognize who was standing before him. His face grew even colder as he sneered. "So you're the Crispin Fleetwood my parents mentioned? Is it fashionable for nouveau riche to steal other people's girlfriends these days?" Phoebe, standing nearby, bristled at the words nouveau richer. A knee-jerk reaction from her school days when she'd been mocked by those who prided themselves on their family heritage. "Mabel is single now. Whoever's got game can have a go. If you can't hack it, just sod off." Phoebe slurred, waving her champagne glass menacingly. Crispin's eyes darkened. "Rather than this, you should think about how not to cause trouble for your parents." I blinked in confusion. Apparently, Arthur knew him. How come I didn't know that? Not important. While they were still locked in a visual standoff, I took the opportunity to grab my bag and slip away. It was past midnight when I finally got home. The maid, Jillian, brought a bowl of porridge to my room, advising me to rest early after such a long night out. The warm porridge settled in my stomach, sobering me up a bit. Yet, as I lay in bed, I found myself tossing and turning, unable to sleep. I glanced at my phone. August 18th, 2022. My 20th birthday, and I was wide awake. Memories flashed through my mind like a slideshow. Our families, the Pools and the Brunswicks, had become close ever since Arthur's mum dragged him to our door to apologize. Mrs. Brunswick, always the picture of propriety, gripped Arthur's shoulder. "Did you do something impolite today? Arthur, why did you behave that way?" Back then, Arthur only came up to my eyebrows, a delicate-looking child in nursery school. Arthur blinked, pointing at me, "Because she's pretty. I like her." Furious, I ran back to my room. I couldn't believe there could be such an ill-mannered child as Arthur. But from that day on, Arthur became my shadow. And he's been following me for over a decade now. No matter how much I tried to avoid him at first, he always managed to find me. Without realizing it, our shared memories had grown so extensive. I remember our trip to France after finishing sixth form. Arthur, always the flashy one, was like a walking target for pickpockets. We left our luggage at the hotel, but when we returned that evening, our room had been cleaned out. They'd even taken my makeup sponges. He grinned, saying we were lucky our phones and IDs weren't stolen. Then took my hand, insisting we go back to the shops to replace everything. On the way there, our phones were nicked too. Back at the hotel, my stomach started cramping terribly. I was at my wit's end. Looking at Arthur's worried and guilty face, I bit my lip weakly and said, "It's that time of the month." Arthur froze for a moment, then told me to rest. When he returned around 8 or 9 p.m., his arms were full of bags. They contained makeup, women's clothes, toiletries, and sanitary pads. "Where did you get the money?" At this point, we were both completely skint. Arthur held up his wrist, showing it was bare. I gasped, "Your watch was stolen too?" "No, I found a shop and sold it for some cash. There's plenty left, we can report to the police tomorrow and continue our holiday." I pinched the bridge of my nose in frustration. "How much did you get for it?" He showed me the amount, and I wished I'd never started dating this boy. He seemed unfazed. If the watch gets nicked tomorrow, at least it's been put to good use now. I was convinced that, at this rate, he'd bankrupt both our families. My parents' decision for our families to be joined in marriage might just be our downfall. Arthur loved me deeply. I used to believe this with all my heart. After turning on my mobile, his message was still there waiting for me. "Are you home? Happy birthday, get some rest soon." I tossed the phone aside and closed my eyes in frustration. Can a person really change so drastically? I remembered how in my previous life, Arthur had coldly demanded that I leave, blaming everything on me without distinguishing right from wrong. And that phone call that never connected. It felt like a sharp blade piercing my body again, twisting my insides into knots. The pain was unbearable. As memories of subsequent events flooded my mind, I wondered why I still couldn't see things clearly. Letting go is truly difficult. Everyone says Arthur has been pursuing me for over a decade, but the truth is, I've loved him just as much. That night, I had a dream where I watched everything unfold as a third person. In the dream, Arthur was wearing a gray hoodie and eating at a restaurant. He kept scrolling through a news article on his phone. Young entrepreneur X found dead at home in early morning. Since when did Arthur pay attention to such news? Unlike our leisurely meals together in the past, he finished his food efficiently and headed to the counter. But when he tried to pay, his card was declined due to insufficient funds. Arthur looked at his balance in surprise, as if he hadn't fully grasped his current situation. Before the owner could confront him, a girl dressed as a waitress took out her own phone and apologetically explained to the owner. "He's my friend, I'll pay for him." The girl raised her bright, energetic face. It was Clara Ashworth. What she said was initially just an excuse, but from that point on, they truly became good friends, and then, their relationship gradually deepened. Clara was an undergraduate at the university where Arthur was on exchange. As they grew closer, I witnessed how Arthur, who never cared much for studying before, now spent every weekend at the library with Clara. He even tutored her? His hair was cut shorter than before, giving him a sharper look. He started wearing shirts and appeared more mature. Though his features remained the same, he was still Arthur. Yet I couldn't see a trace of the man who loved me in him anymore. His eyes held more indifference and intensity, while what little tenderness remained was all given to Clara, who had been by his side for the past year. They drank and chatted by the River Thames, sunbathed on Brighton's Pebble Beach, made mulled wine together in their rented flat, went grocery shopping for ingredients to make shepherd's pie. Floating in midair, everywhere I looked, I saw traces of their life in the city. Yet my own memories were also filled with him. Now, I was expected to step aside. When I woke up, my pillow was wet. Jillian knocked on my door to tell me Arthur was waiting for me outside. I pulled back the curtains to look out. He was standing in our front garden, casually chatting with my mom as if nothing was wrong. I sniffled and pushed open the window. Hearing the sound, he waved at me enthusiastically, as if afraid I wouldn't see him. Arthur grinned like an idiot. How could he be like this? I told him we were breaking up, so why was he still clinging to me? Has Mabel come down? I've had Jillian pack your breakfast here. Take it and eat with Arthur at school, my mum said, stuffing the carrier bag into my hand. Before I could object, she had gracefully departed. My mom has always been good at giving young people their space. I clutched the carrier bag, staring stiffly at the ground. Arthur took a couple of steps closer, his familiar scent enveloping me. He spoke casually, "I'll drive you to class." I mumbled quietly, "We've already broken up." Before I could finish, he stepped forward and naturally slipped his arm around my waist, guiding me in his direction. Sitting in Arthur's passenger seat, my mind was in turmoil. As the route gradually deviated from the way back to school, I spoke up, "You're going the wrong way." Arthur didn't look at me, his gaze fixed on the road ahead, while his hand gripping the steering wheel showed whitened knuckles. He said through gritted teeth, "My girlfriend's about to run away. What class am I supposed to attend?" I silently looked out the car window. The road became increasingly wide and familiar. This was Marine Parade, where we often used to go for drives during our sixth form days. The car stopped by the coast. I walked onto the beach, following Arthur's shadow. The damp, salty sea breeze hit my face. He suddenly turned around. "Mabel, I don't know what's gone wrong between us, but a relationship is two-way. I don't want to end it abruptly without reason. My way of trying to win you back is clumsy. All I could think of was to bring you to the place where we have the most memories. Mabel, I really like you. I love you." In the past, Arthur loved bringing me to this beach. They say names carried away by the seawater receive blessings. So we would write each other's names in the sand and watch as the sea washed the writing away. He would pick up seashells to make wishes. I asked him what he wished for. He beckoned me closer, then quickly kissed my cheek. "I wish to be with Mabel forever." That evening, my face was redder than the sunset clouds on the horizon. The one who said he wanted to be with me forever was him. And the one who betrayed this relationship was also him. He had told me he loved me, and he had also said he despised me. I even learned to be humble because of this relationship, yet still couldn't make him turn back. Each time I think of you, a grain of sand falls from the sky, thus forming the Sahara. Even when I became a parched desert, I never received a drop of rain. But Arthur, like in love, can change. "I won't," he interrupted decisively, but such proof still seemed too weak. "When you broke up with me, was it because you really don't like me anymore?" That wasn't exactly it. I looked at him silently. "If it's not that you don't like me, will you play a game with me? If I lose, I'll let you go." This vulnerable and fragile side of him, I was seeing for the first time. I didn't seem to want to win very much. Arthur crouched down and carefully wrote my name in the sand, stroke by stroke. "If the waves carry away your name, can you stay with me a little longer?" Arthur's voice trembled slightly, his request as careful and humble as I had been in our past life. I watched the waves approach from afar and let out a soft sigh. "All right." The sea water lapped at the shore, but stopped just before my name. Arthur stood up, his lips somewhat pale. He controlled his voice. "Come on, I'll take you to class." In the end, I couldn't be as cruel to him as he had been to me. So I stepped forward, my shoe soles erasing my own name. My nose stung. I wiped away my tears and looked at him. The name, it's been washed away. Arthur froze for 3 seconds, then held me tightly. His breath fell on my neck, mixed with damp tears. I buried my face in his embrace. Arthur, I'll trust you one more time. I'll entrust my life to you once again, betting on whether that future phone call will be answered or not. After repeatedly confirming with me, Arthur was as excited as a primary school student who had just been praised. He pulled me into the passenger seat and drove along Marine Parade for 5 laps. He didn't even care why we had broken up or why we got back together. It seemed that as long as he could be with me, nothing else mattered. Back at the university, I welcomed the exchange students from our overseas partner school as the student representative. Among the sea of unfamiliar faces, my eyes suddenly focused on a familiar one, my pupils constricting in shock. Clara Ashworth? She walked onto the stage, her eyes curved into crescents. Though she was smiling, the moment our eyes met, I felt as if I was being swallowed by a massive quagmire. Clara stepped forward, gesturing that I should give her the bouquet in my hands. I tried my best to appear calm and rational, forcing out a strained, welcome. Clara looked at me, a fleeting, indecipherable emotion flashing in her eyes. Then she took the bouquet from my hands and smiled warmly. Thank you, senior. After the group photo, I changed out of my formal attire and sat backstage, zoning out. Senior Mabel, may I add you on WhatsApp? Clara, wearing a pale yellow dress, waved her phone at me. I stared at her silently, unable to articulate the emotions I was feeling. I'm new to the university and there's a lot I don't understand. I was hoping to ask for your guidance. Even though I knew it was just an excuse, I still displayed my QR code and accepted her friend request. Clara asked me a series of questions about the university, and I highlighted some key points for her to note. She humbly recorded them in her notes app, smiling directly at me. Her cheeks were full, and when she smiled, her eyes curved into crescents. Her radiant smile seemed capable of dispelling any gloom in one's heart. Who could dislike such a smile? By the way, Mabel, do you know where I can get a meal card for the university? I opened the university's official app, preparing to show her the process. Mabel, I've been waiting for you outside for ages. Why aren't you coming out? Arthur lifted the curtain and strode in with his long legs. The moment he looked at Clara, my heart started racing. From the corner of my eye, I also noticed Clara's expression freeze for a moment when she heard Arthur's voice. Mabel, who is this? She asked. I'm her boyfriend, Arthur Brunswick. He merely glanced at Clara before quickly returning his gaze to me, one hand tidying up my things on the table. We have plans, so we'll be going now. Clara's smile froze on her lips. She took a deep breath, but no matter how hard she tried to hide it, she couldn't conceal the tears threatening to fall from her eyes. Arthur took my hand with one hand and picked up my bag with the other as we left the backstage area. I've booked a table at your favorite sushi restaurant for tonight. Don't be late, Arthur said, carefully fastening my seatbelt. I gazed out the window, casually suggesting to Arthur. That new student we just met doesn't seem to have a meal card for the school canteen. Why don't we invite her along? No, Arthur replied nonchalantly as he opened the GPS on his phone. Why not? Arthur sighed. Exchange students all received their meal cards from the school upon arrival. She was just making small talk. Besides, the moment I walked in, her eyes were practically glued to me. Really? I couldn't help but chuckle softly. I'm not being conceited, I know that look all too well. How do you know? Arthur turned his head, looking at me somewhat wistfully, because it's the same way I look at you. Oh, is it? Arthur's eyes suddenly grew intense, his dark pupils focused solely on me. Do you understand now? He leaned in, placing a kiss on my forehead. My ears burning, I replied, I do. If I couldn't be certain during the day, there was one thing I could be absolutely sure of now. Clara Ashworth had also been reborn. Mabel, I know this may be presumptuous, but I don't think someone like you should be constrained by family obligations. You should pursue the happiness that truly belongs to you, Clara said. Was she implying that Arthur didn't belong to me? Indeed, her words were presumptuous. I'm not sure how Clara could tell from our brief interaction that I was currently trapped. but from her sudden return, the way she looked at Arthur earlier today, and this statement that was identical to what she said in my previous life, I became certain that she was also reborn. Because only the Arthur from my previous life would abandon me and favor her. And a preposterous thought slowly surfaced in my mind. What if the Arthur from my previous life and the current Arthur weren't the same person? Otherwise, it would be difficult to explain why the same person's personality could change so drastically in just one short year abroad. As for Clara, in some ways, I quite admire her. She's a hardworking person who gives her all to achieve her goals. Clara's family could offer her little support. Yet she managed to maintain high grades and secure scholarships while juggling multiple jobs to complete her degree. It's hard to dislike someone so excellent. But there was still an unbridgeable gap between her excellence and Arthur's family background. In my previous life, Arthur defied his parents for her sake, even going so far as to collaborate with external companies to undermine his own family's business. If I remember correctly, just before my rebirth, the Brunswick family was in turmoil because of those two. Arthur's mother was so upset she even ended up in hospital. Is this what they consider suitable and happy? If I wasn't able to achieve a perfect rebirth, could it be assumed that the ending for the Arthur and Clara of my previous life wasn't perfect either? If the Arthur from my previous life and the current Arthur aren't the same person, what should I do to prevent him from becoming that other person? Clutching my phone, I noticed my palm had become clammy without me realizing. My gaze fell on Clara's WhatsApp profile picture, and I sank into deep thought. Not long after, Clara contacted me on her own initiative. She chose a cafe near the university to meet me, and I agreed. I took out my phone to check the time and told Arthur he didn't need to pick me up today. Clara had even booked a private room. When I arrived, it seemed she had been waiting for me for a long time. Seeing me, she smiled nervously. After a moment, Clara struggled to break the silence. Mabel, do you really have to be with Arthur? I looked at her calmly. At that moment, the screen of my phone lit up. It was a message from Arthur. No, I must come to pick you up. I'll wait for you in the car park, no matter how long it takes. Clara's expression stiffened slightly. Her right hand tightly gripped her left. Mabel, even if being with Arthur would cost you your life, would you still want to be with him? My fingers paused as I was replying to the message, meeting her slightly flickering gaze. Clara, you're exaggerating a bit. I'm not. Clara's voice was thin. She gathered her courage. Mabel, I know this sounds absurd, but I had a dream where you died because of Arthur. A guilty expression appeared on Clara's face, her voice gradually weakening. The air fell silent again. I put my phone back in my bag and looked at her. Died from kidnapping? Clara's eyes suddenly widened, unable to speak. Mabel, you. I picked up my coffee and took a sip. After a moment, Clara gave a bitter laugh. So you're the same as me. Mabel, I'm sorry. I remained silent, then heard her continue with a somewhat embarrassed expression. Actually, when I was in London before, I didn't know of your existence. Arthur never mentioned you. I didn't know you were boyfriend and girlfriend. Later, when I came back with him, I only knew he had a nominal fiancé. But he said it was a business arrangement, and there were no feelings between you. I thought, sacrificing one's marriage for the family isn't fair to either of you. Clara briefly summarized how she and Arthur met in London, which was similar to what I had dreamed before. It was indeed a sweet and beautiful relationship. Later, her tone became bitter. Clara said she hadn't expected Arthur's parents to be so stubborn and insist on Arthur marrying a woman he had no feelings for. Moreover, Mr. and Mrs. Brunswick didn't like her. Whenever she went to the Brunswick house with Arthur, she could feel the hostility from her future in-laws. Mrs. Brunswick even deliberately made things difficult for her at times, intentionally making her aware of the gulf between her and Arthur. In the past, Clara had always been the best student, graduating with excellent grades while applying for scholarships and working part-time jobs. She was already outstanding among ordinary people. During their time in London, Mr. Brunswick intentionally trained Arthur, providing very limited financial support. This made Clara unaware of how big the gap between her family and Arthur's really was. It wasn't until she went to Arthur's home that she realized any single piece of jewelry his mother wore might be something she couldn't afford in her entire lifetime. And Mr. and Mrs. Brunswick never hesitated to display the Brunswick family's wealth in front of her. If it weren't for Arthur, she probably would have given up long ago when faced with such a family. Even though Clara recognized the difference between the two families, she didn't think Arthur should comply with the family arrangement. Everyone should be free, shouldn't they? After leaving the Brunswick house, Arthur quickly collaborated with external companies and rapidly rose in the industry. In this process, he offended quite a few people, and those enemies didn't know about Clara. They only knew that the Brunswick heir's fiancé was me. So I was kidnapped, and even though an exorbitant ransom was paid, I was still killed. The pain of the blade entering my abdomen resurfaced in my mind. My eyelashes trembled slightly as I tried to stay conscious. Clara said she was sorry for what happened to me in my previous life. At that time, Arthur was teaching her horseback riding and couldn't answer the phone in time. She said she hoped I and the Brunswick family could publicly announce the termination of our engagement. That way, those criminals might not kidnap me, preventing the tragedy from happening again. As for her, she was reborn at my funeral. I have no intention of breaking off the engagement, I said. But, Mabel, aren't you afraid the kidnappers might come after you again? And why marry someone you don't have feelings for? I couldn't help but laugh softly. Do you really think there are no feelings between Arthur and me? Yes, she might not know about Arthur and me while in London. But since she came here as an exchange student, hasn't she noticed anything during this time? Arthur has always been quite high profile in his actions. Even at university, he never hides his affection for me. Phoebe is practically a walking fan club president, often posting about our daily life on social media. If Clara had paid attention, she could easily find this information. Clara's expression turned somewhat pale, as if the truth she had been unwilling to face was now unfolding before her. Perhaps she couldn't understand how someone who was willing to cut ties with his parents for her sake in her previous life could now be with someone else. There's one more thing, Clara. Even if there were truly no feelings between Arthur and me, even if it were just a business marriage, I still wouldn't break off the engagement. A few traces of confusion appeared on Clara's already pale face. For people like Arthur and me, born into such families, we've already enjoyed the best resources our families can provide. For us, marriage isn't about happiness, it's more a way of exchanging resources and optimizing allocations. So even if I didn't like Arthur, as long as the family needs it, I have no reason to resist it due to personal feelings. And I'm obviously very fortunate that my fiancé and I are compatible. Perhaps you don't know, but Arthur and I have known each other for over a decade. I understand very well how lucky it is to be able to marry someone you like, so I, more than you, don't want to give this up. So I cherish this relationship very much. Clara's eyes turned slightly red. Perhaps she could understand all this, but just didn't want to face it. After all, in her previous life, although Arthur had tried his best to be with her, she should be very clear about the price and pressure they had to bear for it. I glanced at her and said slowly, "Don't you think my boyfriend has no similarities with the Arthur you knew before? In my previous life, I was too emotional about Arthur's betrayal. Now, calmly reviewing it, the Arthur who returned from London and the Arthur by my side now are very different in terms of interests, hobbies, and living habits." Clara's gaze regained focus. Just as she was about to say something more, there was a knock on the door of the private room. I got up to open the door, and Arthur immediately pulled me into his arms. He pointed at the watch on his wrist, indicating that he had been waiting for me for a long time. I turned back to look at Clara. "It's getting late, Clara. You should go back and rest. We'll be leaving now, see you later." Just as we were turning to leave, Clara suddenly spoke up. "Arthur, do you like shepherd's pie?" The corners of her mouth stretched into a somewhat forced smile. Arthur frowned. "Sorry, I'm allergic to potatoes." With that, the smile on Clara's face almost fell apart. "Mabel. Mabel? I love you so much." "I want to be with you forever," Arthur said, gently caressing my hand. I chuckled softly. He stopped walking and looked down at me, his expression turning serious. "What's so funny?" "I'm being sincere." I pressed my lips together, but couldn't hide the amusement in my eyes. Suddenly, he cupped my face with both hands and kissed my forehead. Arthur gazed into my eyes and made a solemn declaration, "I'm not going abroad." I was taken aback. After a moment of silence, he continued, "My father wants to send me away to toughen me up. He thinks I'm not mature enough to take over his position. But I've been irresponsible for so many years, it's not like going abroad will magically turn me into the perfect son he envisions. I just felt I wasn't steady enough to take good care of you, but now I realize I can't leave you here alone. I don't trust anyone else to be by your side. I've been waiting for you downstairs for 2 hours, and it already felt too long. How could I ask you to wait for me for a year? I'm not leaving." My father can call me a rebellious son all he wants, it wouldn't be the first time. Tears welled up in my eyes, but I couldn't help laughing as I imagined Mr. Brunswick chasing after Arthur, scolding him. "Stop laughing. All right. By the way, when did you develop an allergy to potatoes?" I didn't remember him having this dietary restriction. Arthur pulled me close as we walked on. "Is that so?" Arthur ultimately decided not to go abroad, and my heart settled a bit. If he didn't go abroad, perhaps he wouldn't become a different person? But Arthur still changed. He began to study diligently, actively participating in all the courses Mr. Brunswick arranged for him. The back seat of his car was often piled high with files to be processed. He was even learning to adapt to the business socializing he used to detest. An uneasy feeling crept over me again. "Arthur?" I watched him as he bent over his paperwork, carefully probing, afraid that when he looked up, his eyes would be full of disdain. "What is it, Mabel?" He paused his work and gently pinched my cheek. Seeing the tender smile at the corner of his mouth, my heart finally settled. Arthur revealed his smooth profile, his eyes fixed on the computer screen, his hands tapping on the keyboard, producing crisp sounds. I leaned closer and quickly kissed his cheek. His fingers paused, and he turned to look at me, one more kiss. Arthur had begun to gradually take over his family's business. Despite his previously carefree attitude, he adapted to the new responsibilities surprisingly quickly. No matter how busy he would still come to pick me up every day so we could go home together. On this particular day, I opened the passenger door and, as usual, placed a gentle kiss on his cheek. Suddenly, a polite cough from the back seat startled me. I turned to look at the person sitting behind, who was wearing a perfectly pressed suit. I had been seeing this face frequently in financial news lately. Crispin Fleetwood. He greeted me first, "Miss Poole, we meet again." I kept my expression neutral. "Hello, Mr. Health Conscious." Crispin's mouth twitched slightly. He wasn't actually that much older than me, but I couldn't help but think of him as older. Remembering the night at the pub when he was sipping sparkling water and talking about staying healthy. It seemed he and Arthur had become quite familiar with each other. My father gave me a project to work on, and surprisingly, Crispin reached out to me about a collaboration. Arthur said, looking rather pleased with himself. I glanced at Crispin in surprise. Under my scrutinizing gaze, he slightly turned his head to look out the window. Yes, Arthur had indeed changed a lot recently. But that was mainly in terms of settling down from his previously wild lifestyle. Crispin, on the other hand, had made a name for himself years ago, and was now the golden boy of the industry, sought after by everyone for partnerships. While his family background might not be as established as mine or the Brunswick's old money, the fact that he had gained such recognition in the industry through his own efforts spoke volumes about his personal capabilities. Him seeking out Arthur for collaboration? I couldn't help but wonder if he was targeting Arthur because he thought he was naive. Crispin, seemingly uncomfortable under my stare, handed me the contract to look over. I examined it thoroughly several times, and to my surprise, there were no issues. In fact, from a profit perspective, it even seemed to favor Arthur more. "Just looking to make a friend," Crispin said, appearing quite sincere. I still couldn't shake the feeling that Crispin had no reason to help Arthur like this. After all, if he wanted, he could secure even better partnerships. But then I thought, perhaps someone like Crispin, a new player in the field, might need the support of an old established family like the Brunswicks. If it was a mutually beneficial arrangement, I felt a bit more at ease. On Christmas Eve, a heavy snow fell, covering the pine trees along the streets with glistening ice crystals. Snowflakes landed on my eyelashes as Arthur kissed my eyes. "Come on, let's go celebrate the new year," he said. Arthur took me to the rooftop of a private club. With just 1 minute left until midnight, the cold wind bit at my cheeks, but my hand was warm in his grasp. 3, 2, 1. Happy New Year! Happy New Year, Arthur. The once dark sky suddenly lit up with countless points of light, slowly forming the shape of a ring box. The box then opened, revealing a ring. I gasped, someone's proposing with drones tonight. The lights shifted again, forming a simple sketch of a couple embracing. Below it were the initials, MP and AB. MP. I turned to look at Arthur beside me, his eyes twinkling like scattered stars. As the drone display in the night sky changed, he got down on one knee and opened a ring box he had prepared. Mabel, I've been waiting for this day for a long time. Will you marry me? I was too choked up to speak. Suddenly, a crowd of people burst onto the rooftop, all our good friends from over the years. Everyone around us was applauding enthusiastically. I glanced to the corner and was surprised to see Crispin there too. I hadn't expected him to come. Phoebe stood in the crowd, shouting at the top of her lungs, "Hurry up! Say yes! Accept it quickly!" With tears in my eyes, I extended my right hand and said, yes. The drone proposal on Christmas Eve was widely shared on various media platforms. Soon, internet users dug up the family backgrounds of Arthur and me. Unexpectedly, because of this, I was kidnapped again. That day, Clara asked to meet me, saying she had decided to return to London and wanted to say goodbye before leaving. I arrived at the agreed spot behind the school, standing across the road where I saw her figure. Clara was standing under a tree, wearing a thick fleece jacket, waving at me from afar. Just as I was about to pass a van, a pair of hands suddenly reached out from the half-open door and grabbed my neck, while another person tied my feet and forcibly shoved me into the van. It all happened in one swift motion. Before they could find rope to tie me up, I managed to press the emergency call button in my pocket. I closed my eyes, my heart pounding. Arthur, can you receive it? One person was driving at high speed in the front, while two in the back were responsible for tying me up. I forced myself to take deep breaths and calm down. But the scenes of the kidnappers killing me in my previous life kept flashing in my mind, and I simply couldn't stay calm. Even though the kidnappers weren't doing anything to me now, I had already started trembling uncontrollably. Why? Even though the trajectory was different now, why was I still kidnapped? I forced myself to stay calm and looked at the kidnappers in front of me, only then realizing that the ones kidnapping me this time were not the same as in my previous life. After searching my body, one kidnapper started emptying the contents of my bag. There were only some cosmetics, tissues, mobile phone. The two kidnappers' expressions dimmed for a moment, and they couldn't help but complain. Didn't they say that drone show last night cost tens of thousands of pounds? How come she's only carrying these few things? The kidnapper disdainfully threw the rare black leather 30 Birkin casually onto the dusty floor. The fatter kidnapper picked it up with interest, speaking with a slight accent. Don't throw it around, I heard these rich young ladies' bags are all expensive. Hearing expensive, the thinner kidnapper immediately became interested. Can this sell for 200 or 300? I listened silently as they discussed. The fat one cradled it like a treasure, and I thought my cherished bag might finally show its worth, but then I heard him continue. Are you daft? It's worth at least 2,000 or 3,000. The thinner one pulled out some tape from under the car seat and covered my eyes and mouth. As my vision went dark, I actually felt calmer inside. At least there was some good news now. The people kidnapping me this time were not the same as in my previous life. The kidnappers in my previous life were desperate financial criminals. They demanded an astronomical ransom from my parents. And even though my parents followed instructions not to call the police and paid the ransom, they still killed me to eliminate evidence. But this group were clearly just street thugs after money. Obviously not very intelligent, and clearly not very knowledgeable about luxury goods. I regulated my breathing, trying to keep myself as calm as possible. The three of them got out of the car and pushed me into a rundown rental flat, then made me call my family. My mom was crying hysterically on the other end, while my dad tried to stay rational. How much is the ransom? I looked at the three kidnappers. The men made some not-so-clever gestures. 300,000. I told my dad emotionlessly, 300,000. The previously noisy phone suddenly went silent. After discussing the ransom delivery method, the three kidnappers saw how quiet I was and thought I was scared stiff, so they started chatting amongst themselves, looking at the black and silver Birkin they were using to hold small hammers and gloves. I thought to myself that I could probably ransom myself now. The agreed time for the ransom delivery was 4:30 a.m., and it was almost time. Suddenly, the thin kidnapper grabbed me awake. He held a knife to threaten me, telling me to call my parents again and say they were raising the price to £30 million in cash. Otherwise, they would kill me. Less than half an hour until the delivery time, £30 million in cash. Despair overwhelmed my senses once again. It turned out these kidnappers initially didn't know my identity. They just saw the video online and thought my family was rich. So they followed me for a day and took the chance when I was alone to try and make some money. It was only just now, when they carefully checked my ID, that they realized my family background seemed far beyond their imagination. For them, fear probably outweighed joy. They were just small-time street extortionists, and realizing they had kicked an iron plate, they were afraid they'd be caught immediately after receiving the £300,000. Rather than that, they decided to go all in, raise the price, and try to make a big score before fleeing. And the most terrifying were these desperate men with nothing to lose. When it was time for the delivery, one kidnapper went out to scout the situation, leaving two to watch me. The thinner kidnapper stared at me with a gloomy gaze. He seemed to be pondering something, while constantly looking out the window. That accomplice hadn't returned. The thin one picked up the sharp knife on the table and walked towards me. The fat one hurriedly held him back, nervously whispering urgently, "Think this through. We agreed with Rupert on 15 minutes, he still hasn't come back. I suspect this little girl's parents called the police. Our only chance now is to kill her and run." The kidnapper's eyes flashed with a murderous glint, and the fat one seemed swayed by his words, taking a step back. I wanted to struggle, but my hands and feet were bound tightly. Seeing the thug approaching me with the knife, I closed my eyes. At that moment, there was a thunderous bang at the door of the flat. The entire door was smashed open in an instant, and a figure lunged towards me through the cloud of dust and debris. The fat guy closer to the door was immediately subdued by the police rushing in. The thin one charged over with the knife, trying to take me hostage. I heard the sound of a blade piercing flesh by my ear. I opened my eyes to see Arthur holding me tightly in his arms. Afterwards, my parents came over to hug me, their eyes red and swollen. I looked up and saw Clara and Crispin not far away. But what I was more worried about now was Arthur's injury. His arm had been stabbed during the rescue. The accompanying doctor came over to bandage him, while the police, even as they were talking to my parents, couldn't help but scold Arthur. This young man was really too rash. That situation just now was very dangerous. If he hadn't handled it well, both of you could have been hurt. Arthur pressed his lips together without speaking, his uninjured hand gripping mine tightly. His gaze fixed on me as if afraid I would disappear the next second. This time, the emergency call I tried to make to Arthur didn't actually go through. It was Clara who saw me being dragged into the van, ran along the tree-lined path to determine the general direction the criminals were heading, and took out her phone to photograph the vehicle model. Not daring to call the police recklessly, she instead called Arthur using the number she remembered from her previous life. Since the criminals' anti-detection awareness was not high, the location of their rental flat was quickly determined after contacting the police. Clara had been running along the edge of the woods out of fear of being discovered, and her face had quite a few scratches. I thanked her sincerely. "Thank you." Clara's face was heavy with apology. "You don't need to thank me. I feel like I owe you much more." After the kidnapping incident, my parents hired 2 bodyguards for me, and Arthur hardly left my side. He heard that the kidnappers had targeted me because of his proposal. He felt guilty for a long time. That evening, after escorting me home, he was about to leave. I stood at the doorway, watching him walk slowly, his footsteps leaving imprints in the snow. The lonely moon cast his shadow long and slanted. I slowly walked up and hugged him from behind, our shadows merging into one. He turned around, his hands clasping my waist, his gaze tracing the contours of my face. Then he leaned in and kissed my lips. I kept my eyes half open, equally lost in his eyes that sparkled like stars. Only when I was almost out of breath did he reluctantly part. Arthur was never stingy when it came to loving me, his affection burning bright and intense without reserve. He was like an eternal flame, standing by my side, making me shine just as brightly.